Chairman's notices. Oh, I'm Councillor Michael Helm, by the way. Chairman's notices. This meeting has been recorded. It will be recorded and published on the Council's website, any part of the meeting held in open session. Fire. In the event of a fire, the siren will sound. Please use the fire exit marked with the green running man. The fire assembly point is outside the main entrance to the council buildings. Please gather there and await further instructions. Health and safety. Please be aware of different levels within the council chamber. The meeting is being held at the council chamber as being monitored and recorded by CCTV. If you want the lift, it doesn't work. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up and indicate if you wish to speak. Could you also say your name at the time for the benefit of YouTube? I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Please note the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphone, so make sure you switch your microphone and speak into it. And turn it off when finished. Please reference the page and paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. Right. Apologies for absence, Tara.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Brian Beale. Thank you very much, Chairman.
And Richard Holmes as well.
And Richard Holmes, yes.
He's not very well. Minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th of March on pages 5 to 10 are approved to true and accurate. I so move. Do I have a seconder for this? Right, got that. Any member wish to speak or raise any matter of accuracy, they need to indicate if they wish to speak. Cool, this is good. Cool. Public participation, we have none, I don't believe. Sarah, is that right?
Yes, Chairman, we've got no public participation.
Right.
We've got disclosure of interest.
Yeah, I've got that next. Disclosure of interest, please. Any disclosure of interest? No, right. Public. Oh, come on. We have now Maldon District Community Safety Partnership Update, pages 11 to 36. And who's going to present that? Spencer will present that.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of those joining on the YouTube link, my name's Spencer Clark and I'm the Community Safety Manager for Maldon District Council. Members would have had a report in advance to read, and what I'm going to try not to do is Sergeant Matt Dalby's got a presentation which follows this, so I'll try not to duplicate anything. I have put a few slides up for the benefits of members just to go through some of the statutory process we have as a community safety partnership, and just to explain a few of the pieces of good practice we've been doing in the last year, and highlighting a little bit on horizon scanning on where we think crime could be going and what sort of new powers will be coming in the next year or so. So on page 11 of the report, this just goes through the statutory duties. And Tara, if you could go on to the first slide, that'd be useful, please. So this is just really to flag up what the statutory duties of a community safety partnership is. So when I say a community safety partnership, it's not just Maldon District Council and Essex Police. It's also the other agencies such as the Fire Service, such as the Probation Service, Health Services, and I think that's all the agencies there. So it's all of the agencies all work together and form the partnership. So the piece of legislation we work to is the Crime and Disorder Act 1998. And by all of those agencies working together, we have what's called a Responsible Authorities Group. I chair the current Maldon District Council Responsible Authorities Group, and we get good attendance from all statutory partners at the moment, I'm pleased to say. The one I did miss out was Essex County Council, sorry about that, but all of the partners are around the table, which is really good, together with elected members, one of which is here tonight in Councillor Huebner. So that's what we do as a group. The other statutory piece of work we do each year is what's called a strategic assessment. That starts round about now. So we work on data from the 1st of October to the 30th of September. So we just got into October, so we work on that piece of data from last year, and we gather evidence from all of the data from police, fire, road traffic collisions, etc. And that enables us to look at what we're going to be focusing on for the following year. We also work on public health data, so things like hospital admissions, etc. But more importantly, for somewhere like Maldon, we also take into account public perceptions. So we can work on perception data. So one of the things that regularly comes up when we ask members of the public, what do you want to see in Maldon? It's around road safety and irresponsible driving. That always comes up as normally the #1 concern for Maldon. So once we've completed this strategic assessment, we then agree the priorities. When I say we, the Responsible Authority Group agrees the priorities. So we're in a position where next week we'll receive our crime risk matrix, and we'll sit down as a partnership, probably with my colleagues next to me here, and we'll score the matrix, and then the police will then do a little bit of analytical work on our 4 key priorities. So they'll do like a deep dive. So if we're talking about drugs and gangs, they'll do that piece of work there to enable us to focus on it better. Once we've agreed those priorities, which is usually around March time, we'll then have an action plan for delivery, and it enables us to monitor progress and also the financial spend on that particular one. If you recall, a couple of years ago, through audit and governance, we had some recommendations from that. So we red, amber, green rate that action plan now for the partners to look at each time. The other piece of statutory work we do is present to overview and scrutiny twice a year, which is one of which I'm doing tonight. Thank you, Tara. If we can move on to the next one. So these are our current priorities for Maldon, and I wouldn't expect them to change dramatically for next year. So they're all things you'll be familiar with. So the sort of things we've been doing is tackling crime and reducing reoffending. One of the things we did add this year was around high harm offences. The second one is around driving down antisocial behaviour. The third around identifying and supporting vulnerable people. So one of the things we added this year is around violence against women and girls. And I'm working on a strategic group, county group, about having violence against women and girls strategy across Essex. Also, social isolation, and I'll go on a little bit about that later on, to why we need to flag that. The other 2 are around rural crime, and as I said before, around promoting road safety and challenging irresponsible driving. So for the next slide, please, Tara. What I thought I'd do is I'd do a little bit of a focus on what we do well. I'm just picking out a few things from the report rather than going through in detail. So I'm not planning to say anything about crime statistics, because I'm going to leave that to the police. One of our statutory duties is around preventing violent extremism. So I chair the Essex Prevent Delivery Group across Essex, and only this afternoon I had the local contest board where I sit down mainly with members of Essex Police to discuss what's going on around the protect and prevent duties. So what have we been doing this year? So I took this role on just over a year ago, and as you can well imagine, in the last year around prevent, it's been a little bit lively. There's been a lot going on. So one of the first things we undertook on behalf of Essex was a local benchmarking exercise where we gathered together what's going on across the whole of Essex. I'm pleased to say the Home Office scored us as 3. You can get 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. 3 is a pretty good score. It's duty met. So for an area such as Essex, which isn't a funded area, so we're not a London borough or a metropolitan city. We don't get any funding towards Prevent. We got a score of 3. The only thing which really stopped us getting more was there's a few outstanding things we need to do. One of those is what we call a situational risk assessment, which looks at what all of the risks are around Prevent and what's being done. I've actually completed that now, and a draft has been sent to the Home Office, and they're quite happy with that. We're just waiting for some input from some of the other districts across Essex. So that's been complete. So I'd like to think that next year when we go through the benchmarking exercise, we'll edge up to a 4, which will be really good for an unfunded area. One of the other things we've done this year, and some of the members would have attended this on the hottest day of the year, done some work with elected members around Prevent. Some of you may have attended it. I think we had 16 of the Maldon members attend that. And we done worked around the Home Office guidebook for elected members, so that it gave members more of a awareness around Prevent, and I use that as an opportunity to do some general safeguarding training as well. So that sort of presentation which we've done to members has been circulated to a number of the other districts in Essex because they want to follow suit on that. In terms of what we've been doing, I mean, when I took on the chair of this group, I'm not one for sitting in lengthy meetings, so I cut them down a bit to 90 minutes. And now what we do is a 90-minute meeting followed by an hour of a learning exercise. So the first exercise which we've done was around exploring anti-minority narratives with Dr. Gareth Harris. And the most recent one, which I've done in September, was with Dr. Simon Masood, who's an expert on neurodiversity and how people who have neurodiverse comality are susceptible to radicalisation. And it's really interesting to explore that. And when we actually put it out to the wider groups, we had 96 people attend that training exercise, which is really good. Just another thing about that is around Prevent links with hate crime. If you look at hate crime stats, you look at Prevent referrals, there's a clear link between that. And it's important that what we do is respond to local concerns, and more importantly, local concerns and community tensions again go together. Hate crime, community tensions. So that's a piece of work we've been doing well. You might think it might not ever happen in Maldon. Only last month we had Patriotic Alternative leafleting in Maldon. So Patriotic Alternative, who have been very, very active in Essex in the last year or so. So it is going on, and it's important that if you do get anything around that, you report it, so we've got the intelligence as to where it's happening. So that was just a little bit about Prevent. Tara, if you could go on to the next slide. Rather than going through the report word for word, I've done a little bit on horizon scanning and what's going to be happening over the next year. So one of the new duties which comes in will be the serious violence duty. We don't quite know what that's going to look like yet. We do know that every district within Essex will have to pay attention to this and have to do work around it. One of the other areas I work in is around violence and vulnerability, and I sit on the Violence and Vulnerability Operations Group. And the Violence and Vulnerability Group has decided that they'll do this piece of work for Essex. So they'll do all the data management around the serious violence duty. And we expect that to come in early next year. So that's something perhaps at the March meeting, when we meet again, I'll be able to tell you in a bit more detail about what we'll be doing around serious violence. A lot of it is around data sharing, which we do already. The sheer fact that we work alongside the police and we share data really well, you know. So I think it's a lot of the stuff we already do. I think this duty has been brought in for agencies that don't share data. So we'll be interested to see around that. The other thing which may come in next year, I think it's been going on a while, the protect duty now. So the protect duty comes out of after the tragic Manchester bombing, which was now 4 years ago. The actual consultation on protect was done last July. And the Home Office published the findings of the Protect duty in January. Things really haven't moved on a lot since then. So I can't put my hand on my heart and say that Protect duty will be coming in next year. What will happen is that they'll be looking at the publicly accessible locations, and each district will have a duty around that. So say, for example, if we looked at a publicly accessible location for Maldon, I think Maldon Promenade would feature very high, and we as a district council would have to pay duty to that around having competent persons around managing those areas. So when I say competent persons, people who are adequately trained around counter-terrorism. So that's something which will come in next year, the POWs, but the Protect duty, I think what's been happening with the government in the last year, it's probably not high on their agenda at the moment. Another thing which has lapsed a bit is the Home Office review of community safety partnerships. So the Home Office are working with the Police and Crime Commissioners, and they'll be reviewing how community safety partnerships work. Again, this is a piece of work which was meant to be completed. It was meant to be like a light touch 3-month review. Again, that's been stalled, and I should imagine it's because of what's been happening in the government over the last year or so. We in Essex are already in a good position. We've already done a lot of meetings. I've attended LGA meetings and given feedback around what we think should be happening. I'd like to think Essex is in a relatively good place, and we've been working very closely with the Commissioner's Office around that. So again, hopefully in March, I'll be able to feedback a bit more about what is expected and what the anticipation will be for community safety partnerships going forward. So what else is going to impact on crime? I think every day we hear about the cost of living crisis, and things like the cost of food. Only yesterday I was reviewing some of the data around fuel poverty. So when you think about fuel poverty, you might think about areas of deprivation, but you can also think about asset-rich areas. So somewhere like Tillingham could be what we call an asset-rich area, where people might be living in their own homes, but they might be retired and not have the funding available to heat their homes going forward. So I think we need to look very carefully about that. I know that's not direct link to crime, but where it could have a link is around things like fire safety. And we're in a position in Maldon where in the last 12 months we've had 3 fatal fires now. Normally there's 3 fatal fires a year in Essex. And all of those fires have been very, very similar, in the victim being a lone person who has been socially isolated and had clutter/hoarding tendencies. So a piece of work we're doing with the fire service is doing a little bit of work around data about where we're trying to predict what areas we can target with what we call safe, well and secure visits. And it's getting back to old-fashioned door knocking, because most of these victims were probably known to the community, but not necessarily known to services. So I think that's important piece of work going forward. Finally, I know we all speak about the pandemic being over and everything, but in terms of the impact going forward, it's still massive. One of the groups I vice chair is Mid-Essex Children's Partnership Board, and seeing the spike in mental health amongst young people this year, it is going through the roof. So it's somewhere we really need to look at. As I said before, social isolation and the impact that can have. I just mentioned those 3 fires we had, but also the increase in vulnerability. People, it still has that impact even 2 or 3 years down the line. Thank you, Tara. If we can just move on to the next slide. So I said I'd flag up some of the good practice which we do at Maldon. And again, I hope I'm not duplicating anything which Sergeant Dolby or Acting Chief Inspector Kelly Thurston's going to say. So I will. So the joint working arrangements, The hub arrangements work really well. One thing which has really worked well for Maldon is the tri-service role. So many of you were bumped into Les Davis. I think in a joint strategic command meeting, a strategic coordination meeting, I refer to him as the saviour of the Dengie. So the work that Les has been doing has been fantastic. Not just giving advice about fires, but whenever we're doing patrols, he's always there. He knows the community so well. People like speaking to the fire service. They don't like talking to us, do they? But they're much more approachable to fire service. So you know, that's a really good piece of work, and I'm pleased to hear that they're actually extending that role to Uttlesford District next, I believe. So it's a role that works really well in rural areas. So that's really good. And the close working relationship we have with the Essex Police Rural Engagement Team around things like hair coursing. You know, they've been doing so much work around that. The reductions in hair coursing, the reductions in unauthorised encampments in the last year is fantastic. Both are over around 50%, aren't they? Which is really good, the way we've been working alongside that. Other areas we've done quite a lot of this year is around community engagement. It's been nice to get outside again and speak to people. You know, we've had 2 years of pandemic, so there's been lots of events, and we're trying to get to most areas. We've been to Prom Park twice, we've been to Riverside Park in Burnham, we've been to Tollsbury, we're at Haybridge next week on Wednesday of next week. So we're trying to get out into those areas. Another good piece of work was a couple of months ago, we had our street week for Maldon. Councillor Heebner and myself spent the morning on Maldon High Street talking to members of the public and drinking coffee and, you know, and generally having a good chat with people, and it really worked quite nicely. We rocked up outside the bus stop and everyone was pleased to see us. So doing that general engagement was good, but also the patrols. And I'm not going to say any more about that because I know that my colleagues are going to pick up on the things like the social media and the dispatch. Education and awareness is a really important part of community safety. You recall last year Crucial Crew had to go virtual because of the pandemic. This year we were back face to face. So we've done a bit of a mixture of face to face delivery and virtual delivery. I went to the first set at Maldon Football Club, and the young people were so much engaged in the professional drama because it was face to face, you know, and it's a good hour and a half exploring things around vulnerability after that. And I was really pleased the way that went. And for those schools that couldn't get out to those areas, we still delivered the virtual delivery for them, because as we know, the prices of coaches these days is quite high. So that worked really well, and we've already planned on that again for next year. I think we've already booked Melbourne Football Stadium for one of the events next year. And also, when I spoke about being responsive, we had some issues around hate crime in Burnham earlier this year. So the same company who delivered the professional drama for Crucial Crew went into a school and delivered the same professional drama around hate crime. So providing some hate crime awareness for young people. So being responsive there. The other types of things we've offered are things like Safer Places have been asked to do healthy relationship sessions in the schools. Reach Every Generation have asked to do work around exploitation. We've done the general safeguarding awareness training. The J9 training, which is around domestic abuse. We've got another community session coming up on the 24th of November, which has been advertised. So if anyone wants to join that, they're more than welcome to. And finally, one of our most recent events was the Older Persons event at Maldon Stadium, where we had over 80 over 65s turn up. And again, a very successful event. And we've got practitioners lining up to do next year already. I think we've got a knitting group who want to attend the next one. But it's great. It's great to see people chatting to people, you know, and it's all about reducing social isolation and making people more confident, and they can learn lots of things about scams, etc., on things like that. Finally, on this slide, what we're trying to do more of is effective use of technology. Maldon District, I think we're the first and only district to introduce TrueCam, which is added enforcement on our roads. In the last couple of years, so that's this year and 2021, which was a bit of a slightly more difficult year because it was a bit stop, start and go because of the pandemic. We've done 5 short of 6,000 effective stops and reports. So those 6,000 stops in those space of time, people either go for driver training or get a prosecution. So that's much over and above what the police can actually deliver in those areas. Really important part of the work we do. So on average, we do about 40 hours a month at about 19 different sites and parishes. So that's a really important piece of work. As you know, a couple of years ago, we upgraded the CCTV system to a high definition system. We get some good results from that. Last week, about this time at 4 o'clock, we had an arrest for somebody with a bladed article on the high street. So, you know, things like that do happen in Maldon, but it is effective on the way we work it. Another thing we're introducing very, very soon, when I say very, very soon, I've got the base station here with me tonight because I've just picked it up off the desk. There's a new radio system, a new wave radio system for Maldon District. As you probably know, Maldon doesn't lie very well in terms of radio connectivity because of the rurality of it. This new wave radio system works on mobile phone data. So it will hop to whatever mobile phone data network is available. So our officers, wherever they're going to be in the district, will be able to speak direct with each other and back to the CCTV control room in Chelmsford as well. So that's something that's being introduced. And that's what I said about being data driven. One area of work which we're getting so much better data around is the fire service, the fire data we're getting. Things like cluster 1, 2 and 3 fires, and it enables us to focus our activity much better. Okay, I think this is the final slide, Tara.
That's the last slide.
There it is. I thought I'd put a picture on it. Everyone likes a picture. So this was last week. Last week was Hate Crime Awareness Week. So on Wednesday, we spent the morning. When I say we, that's me taking a picture, honestly. So I was there. You got Les there on the far side there. You got Les Davis, who's our tri-service pilot. Got Scott Smith, who's our community safety engagement officer till up until last Friday. And then Rosie, who's hiding behind the person there, who's the Maldon community safety engagement officer. And that's again, we chose the same location as we did for Street Weeks because so much footfall there, buses stop there, people get off the buses and they want to have a chat with you. Next step is we'll be doing some work in the schools a bit further, going into the schools and doing some more education. But that's I've tried to make that a little bit more interactive rather than just going through the report, because members had an opportunity to read that in advance. So I'll pause there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Spencer. If there are any questions from anybody, stand up, say your name for the microphone.
Councillor Bell, would you like me to stand up?
No, we don't have to go there.
Remain seated. Thank you. No, thank you very much for that, Spencer. That was really interesting. I'm after some reassurance, really. Hate crime are the buzzwords of the moment, and some forces across the country have been taking a little bit of a, wildcat approach to what is and isn't hate crime, and there have been cases of mainly women being visited at home by police officers for crimes such as, and I quote, being untoward about paedophiles online. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of Miller versus College of Policing and what does and does not constitute a protected characteristic under the Equality Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? That's heard.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to speak to the police officers about the crime figures later on, but specifically talking for your presentation, Spencer, thank you very much indeed for that. And I have to say, I certainly applaud the work that you're doing. But I have got a number of questions, and I hope you can help me with it. You said that when you were engaging with the public there, that their number one priority was road safety and irresponsible driving. Now, I find that very surprising because when people talk to me, their number one priority is seeing police officers on the beat, actually seeing police. And this was the Police and Crime Commissioner's number one priority, more local and visible policing. That seems to have disappeared in these new priorities. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. You spoke about the road safety. I'm just looking at antisocial behaviour. That's right. Looking at the force figures, antisocial behaviour is recorded as being down by 51.8% in the force. In Maldon, it's recorded as being down as 59%. So I'm wondering why that's a priority if what is happening is already working. So whatever you're doing needs to be carried on. I'm sorry, Chairman, I've got a number of points.
Yeah, just carry on.
Thank you. Right. Rural crime. How do we measure those figures of rural crime? Because again, this is things that people are asking us. We can't find it from these figures here. You've spoken about hair coursing, but things like theft of tractors, theft of plant. How do we, or how can this committee question or challenge any of those figures if we don't have that information? You also spoke about hate crime. Now, hate crime in the Maldon area has gone up from 2021 from 58 cases to 106, a rise, and these are your figures, of 82.8%. Now, of those 106, 9 have been solved. Now, I'll need to speak to the police officers about solved rates later on. But as far as the force goes, 350 more offences in 2022, up 8%, and again 11% are solved. So one could argue that there's more being reported, which is what we always hear when the crime figures go up. But the bottom line is, more is not being solved. We have now 3,700 police officers in Essex. In fact, I think it's plus that, more than we've ever had in the history of Essex Police. And yet, crime is still going up. Again, I'll take that up with the police officers. But what I would like to know, really, just to summarise, is the road safety aspect. It seems to me we should see more police on the beat. ASB or antisocial behaviour, is actually at 59% in the green, which I think is good. Of course it's good, but I wonder why it's a priority. And also, how can we measure rural crime?
Thank you. Shall I can answer some of those, Chair, and then some of my colleagues might want to. I think the run around hate crime from Councillor Hull. Can the police take that? Councillor Bell. Sorry. If that might be appropriate, if you take that one. But if I take Councillor Hurd's ones one by one, as I can remember them. So road safety. Yes, road safety, when we do surveys, gets flagged high, always. And that's why we do so much work around road safety. When you said about police visibility not being there, on priority 2, it's around driving down antisocial behaviour in public places. with an emphasis on youth nuisance and improving partnership visibility. So that is our priority. So it's not something we can, think when I say about improving partnership visibility, I think it's in terms of policing numbers, that's very much down to the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner. But and I do get on my high horse about about partnership visibility sometimes. In my view, having a youth worker walking around Tollsbury is probably more effective than having a Bobby on the beat walking around Tollsbury. Having a community protection officer walking around Promenade Park engaging with young people is also probably more effective than having a police officer. And I think where we need to move forward, and I'm going to very much leave this to the police to report on this, is partnership visibility can be Sergeant Matt Dolby at Bradwell-on-Sea tweeting that he is out walking around the sea wall, and a lot more people will see that rather than somebody who might look out of their curtain at the time to see if there's a policeman there. So I think in terms of partnership visibility, we need to be a bit clearer about how we do that. But in terms of increasing policing numbers, and again, I'm not going to say anything about the police because they'll talk about how the numbers are going to increase. So I think that's important to take on board. With regards to antisocial behaviour, these are our priorities for last year. So we then look at the data this year to see if that will still be a priority. I'm going to be slightly cynical here in terms that antisocial behaviour I don't think has changed too much. We as a partnership are still dealing with young people causing problems. We're still dealing with neighbour nuisance. We're still dealing with neighbours who work from home and are clearly less tolerant with their neighbours now. What we're seeing here, I'd like to be in the same position next year and to see what the reduction or increase in antisocial behaviour is, because a lot of those ASB complaints would have probably been COVID breaches and things like that, and it's going to take a while for that to settle out. So whilst on paper it looks really good that if there's a 50% reduction, I think in reality I don't think that is the case. I don't think there's been a massive increase. We did see increases when lockdown released. We had a lot of young people going out into parks, drinking alcohol, taking nitrous oxide, etc. So we'll take a good judgment on that as to whether it's still there. My gut feeling is I think it should still be there as a priority, but we'll let the data tell us and we'll analyse the data before we make that decision. In terms of rural crime, I think the best way for this committee to look at that in detail would be perhaps for the March committee if we invited Chief Inspector Terry Maldon, who looks after the rural crime team, to do a presentation similar to what my colleagues are doing tonight, because he can give you the full detail on that. I go to the strategic coordination groups. I know there's been a reduction in hare coursing. I know there's been a reduction in unauthorised encampments. And in terms of officer numbers, I think the team's doubled, hasn't it, in terms of PC numbers from what it was 2 years ago. So, and more importantly, that enables them to get out to the businesses like farms. That enables them to go and give the advice. But I think the actual figures, it'd probably be best placed that the Chief Inspector for that area commented on that. But we'll be more than happy, Councillor Hurd, to go away and get those figures for you. Finally, around hate crime, as you quite rightly suggested, hate crime has increased. We promote the reporting of hate crime much more now. Similarly, 3 or 4 years ago when we done that around domestic abuse, the domestic abuse figures, we encourage people to report hate crime more. So that could be one area. You do get repeat offences in some areas as well. And some of the work, I noticed it's not applicable to Maldon, but in Chelmsford, where we've had a big spike in hate crime, one of the main areas where that spike is the hospital and the mental health unit. And it's a piece of work which we're doing, the police are doing independently around that. So we are aware of it. We do, as an independent advisory group, monitor hate crime every 2 months. We discuss it with our community groups. I think it might be useful for me to go away and look at the data and then look at the victims as well, because you'd be surprised that most of the victims are probably white males from hate crime in both Chelmsford and Maldon. So that's something, you know, we probably need to do a little bit more work around. We're in a position now where Essex has now got its strategic hate crime partnership back. It's been sort of quiet for a year or so. It's been relaunched. There's a hate crime strategy for Essex now, and I assure you that Maldon will be very much involved in that. With regards to the actual detection rates, again, it's not something I can answer, but I'll happily let the police make a comment on that.
Okay. Right, Councillor Spencer.
I'll just come back on that, please, Chairman.
Okay.
Just for clarity, I certainly wasn't suggesting that the community safety partnership was not visible. So I certainly wasn't speaking about that because it is visible. And the other thing that I would like to see on the figures, if possible, is to have a bar chart, because the figures that you present at the moment, you can't really compare Maldon to Uttlesford to Basildon. I mean, obviously it's going to be bigger in Basildon and Chelmsford, of course it is. But I would just like to see those figures produced in a bar chart to see where we're going. But I would like to come back to the police officers when it's my turn, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Spencer.
Yes, so first of all, I would like to thank Spencer for such a clear report and outlining all the good things that you're doing with Crucial Crew and all of that really useful information. I've got a couple of questions. I've got some questions afterwards on the figures, which I'll leave until we've had the police officer's report. But I would like to go to the CSP update and to pages 13 and 14. And at 3.3.1, we've got at the end of that, the community policing team will also have a hub at MDC offices, which will comprise of 1 sergeant and 6 police constables. And I know we've spoken before on this because my question was about the accessibility of the police station that we have there, because both some of us and members of the public have actually found it quite difficult. Sometimes they have to wait to see if somebody comes in and out of the station. It's not always easy to attract attention. So will that be more accessible, do you know, with the front desk? I know that Richard Holmes was looking at that, so I don't know what the answer to that was.
So, Councillor Spencer, in terms of policing numbers, again, I think the police will update on that.
Okay.
I can introduce you to the sergeant here. This is Sergeant Matt Dolby, so he will be looking after Maldon going forward. So I've delivered on that promise. In terms of accessibility, I think that's the conversation we need to have. I think the district council offices are more accessible now. Obviously, we've gone for a 2-year period of having the vaccinations coming out the front there, but I think it's a discussion we need to have with the police, and I'm sure we can come to an amicable arrangement so that it can be improved, Councillor.
Okay, and there was one other question which I know you were already did know about, which I've referred here to 3.3.3 on page 14. If any members want to look at that, and it really regards Haybridge actually, and I think it's something that could end up happening with other parishes. I hope not. But we're looking here at, the CSEO works closely with CEOs and the tri-service role funded by police. So as you probably are aware, we've got a situation with Haybridge Parish Council where they have ended their contract as at the end of this month, I believe, with our CET team, and have actually gone down the line of putting out an advert for their own ASB type officer. I don't want to sort of name the role incorrectly. So my question was really with regard to what will happen then with Haybridge with regard to the partnership, and how that will carry on, what the degree of work will be with somebody being employed by the parish instead of Maldon District Council, because I wasn't, and Heybridge obviously is an area of some concern. As you're probably aware, we've had a number of fires in the woods, some of those caused by antisocial behaviour. So I've got all kinds of worries around that, and I know there are other Heybridge members in here as well tonight. So I'd just be grateful for your views on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Council. I mean, it's obviously disappointing that Heybridge Parish have made that decision. It's disappointing. We as a community safety partnership, it will make no difference really as to what we do there. We will continue, like next week we'll be there doing our community engagement day, marking bikes. So that will continue. I'll still be continuing with discussions around using Plantation Hall as one of our redeployable cameras, which is one of the discussions we've already had with the parish. It's difficult for me to speculate on what will happen with the new role. All I will say is all of our community engagement officers are accredited with Essex Police. That accreditation is with Maldon District Council. I'm not aware of any parishes in Essex who have accredited officers working as part of that role. So it will be interesting to see what powers that officer would have. It'd be similar to those of a private security firm, I think. Again, I'm speculating, I don't know. but that's something I think we'd need to take into account. But, it's probably not wise for me to, give a full response on that. No. But, in terms of the work we do as a partnership with them, there'll be no change really. And it's, so it won't, people like Les in the picture there, who's a tri-service officer, there'll be no change as a result of that. They just won't have the additional enforcement things like TrueCam, etc. I should imagine that, but it's probably not in the role to give that full response. So I wouldn't want to speculate, but that would be my views on the matter.
Thank you very much, Spencer. That's appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Hubner.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Morgan, Councillor for Wickham Bishops and Woodham Ward. Thank you, Mr. Clark, for your presentation. And I really sort of coming on from Councillor Hurd's point, really. I've been elected since February, and the one point that every parish council makes to me when I go to see them is the concern over speeding in this in the ward. And the perception, maybe unfair, I don't know, that Essex Police are not doing anything about it. So I think there's a degree of work to be done here to sort of reinforce and to reassure those people and the residents that they represent that there is something being done. And I mean, you say there's 6,000 people who've been booked for speeding. I don't think any of those were necessarily in my ward. I'd be very surprised they were. And the great thing, for example, is the fact, the extension of technology. You're saying about TrueCam, etc. Well, great, if we can have those, if those can be rolled out throughout the area, then that would be welcome. But as I say, there is a perception that Essex Police are not doing anything about the speeding problem in the ward.
Chair, if it's okay to comment there. I mean, when we talk about traffic enforcement, it's very much down to the Safer Essex Roads Partnership. I believe at the last meeting we had Adam Pipe, who is the head of roads policing, give a very good presentation. About 2 weeks ago, they've done a sort of surround the town thing for Maldon, where there was an incredible amount of enforcement. What I'll try and do is pick out the figures for you from that. Obviously, what they tend to do is they tend to choose a town or a city to do some additional enforcement work, and Maldon was subject to that only a couple of weeks ago. So I'll try and get those statistics, but I will take on board your comments, Wickham Bishops. Anything we can do as a district council, anything we can do with the community, such as community speed watch, I'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you outside the meeting around that.
Can I take Councillor Morley, because he's been waiting, then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Spencer, for that report. Three things. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the police and whoever is involved with the hair coursing in particular. Being a farmer, it's quite an intimidating and can be quite violent and frightening thing. And it's funny you brought that up, because I've just noticed in the last year, hares across our farm, I've never seen so many. So something's definitely happening, but it is quite a nasty, excuse me, violent thing to go through, confronting them in the dark, often on your own. I know you probably shouldn't do it, but you just do. It's natural instinct. So I'd like to thank you on that, and whatever you've done, keep going. As regards the pandemic, do you see that continuing on with working from home? Is that a feature as well, with violence and poverty, because they're using the heating, obviously, whereas before they'd be in the office? So that was your views on that. And also fly tipping, do you have figures? Is that up or down, the same? And being in the waste business myself, is there still a stop and check vehicles for waste carriers licence, particularly small transits, you know, little dodgy skip lorries and things? Is that still going on? Any figures? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll feed back your views about hair coursing up to the rural team. I will thank, yeah, and I think it's something like about 56% it's down or something like that, but there's certainly been doing a lot of work around that, and I constantly follow the police on Twitter. Whenever they've had a successful catch, they always feed that back.
Well, violent crime, I mean, it's not just about the hairs, don't get me wrong, I love a hair, but it's what goes with it. Sorry.
Most certainly. In terms of trade waste inspections, yes, we still do that. The community engagement officers regularly work with the rural engagement team. I remember early in the year we worked out at Plantation Hall, so any cars coming down there, we're pulling in the vans and doing inspection of licences. So a lot of that's going on still. Again, we done a day of that during the street week, which we done in August. So again, working with the rural engagement team, done the trade carriers licences. Fly tipping, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult thing to tackle. I mean, fortunately, I don't think Maldon suffers as much as some of the other areas in Essex. A lot of the people who do the fly tipping come out of London, and so areas like Thurrock and Epping probably get the worst of it.
Birch is a nightmare. Just say if you've got a patrol up there, you will.
And it's something really, really difficult to challenge, because you can guarantee, even if you put something like covert cameras in or ANPR, they're probably working on false plates anyway. So it's catching them as they do it, and but it's something we do tackle. We tackle it. The rural engagement team tackle, and the environment agency work alongside us as well for the major fly tips as well. So work is going on around that. Thank you.
Councillor Hurd.
Thank you. Just a brief. I'm sorry to have a second bite of the cherry, Chairman.
That's all right.
It's just,
no problem.
just that with Councillor Morley talking about speeding in Maldon High Street and down the hill, we have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Have we had any prosecutions at all? Can anybody help me with that? Any prosecutions at all for those areas?
I think my simple answer for that, Councillor Hurd, is I do not know the answer to that question, but I'd be more than happy to speak with the relevant people to see what we can get from that.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you very much, Spencer. Much appreciated. Thank you for that. And now we move. Anne, sorry, Anne. Sorry, you're going to have to wait for the thanks. Anne.
Right, just an update. There is some fly tipping in Goldhanger. You know, the really big house where the S-Bend is?
Yeah.
Just the other side of Goldhanger on the right there, someone's dumped a lot of stuff there. Have we actually, I don't know who this is to ask, the police or yourself, have we got any community police support officers still?
You're talking about PCSOs, police community
Whatever the
support
initials
officers,
are,
the ones
yeah.
that wear the blue t-shirts. Yes, we do, yeah.
It's just that we used to have a Romanian girl. I know she's left now, but she was absolutely brilliant. And we haven't really got that contact anymore. I know when Gary was doing it, until he resigned, he got a lot of confidence and whatever from the youngsters. And we did have a presentation not so long ago by Sue Green and is it Lee? He just seemed to be going on about dog poo, which was, although it's probably a priority somewhere, I don't know. I think there's a lot more going on in Heybridge drug-wise and everything else than a bit of dog poo. But yeah, I mean, the people that we were talking about visualisation on the streets, she used to be really, really good. And I presume with Heybridge Parish Council taking on a full-time, I don't know what they're going to call him, they're going to give him a van as well. But I presume we're going to get the visualisation through him. But I think you're right that we're going to lose the TrueCam aspect because none of them are trained. And obviously they're not going to have any relationship with the police. So I don't know how we're going to get on with that. Perhaps I'll ask the BNP.
Thank you.
Can I just
Yeah,
answer
of
one?
course.
Just to answer one perspective of that, so under which will probably encapsulate some of the other bits, and I don't want to steal Sergeant Dorby's thunder, who's prepared a nice presentation for you, but with the new 1 and 5, it's actually 1 and 5, not 1 and 6 officers come into Maldon Town Centre team. The hope is that we will be able to bring a PCSO into that team as well. One hasn't been factored into the team at the moment, but we do have PCSOs that cover Chelmsford and Maldon as a whole, and there are 2 PCSOs that do regularly come out into the rural areas, but they cover the entirety of Maldon district, which covers Southwood and Ferrers as well. So they do come out, but it's unfortunately, it's one of those, unless you've probably got your nose pressed up against the window and they actually drive past your house at the time you have your nose pressed up against the window, you may not see them, but they are out and about quite regularly. And the TrueCam speeding cameras, regardless of whether they're coming out of the council, what we can do is if there are members of the public that wish to become part of the community speed watch, they can sign up to it through Essex Police, they can be trained, and then they can go out and do the speed watch as well. But we do have community speed watch members around the LPA who do use the TrueCam. And what happens is, if you don't know how it works, they might catch somebody speeding, and because they're not police officers, they can't stop them, they can't give them a ticket. But what they do is take the details, take the registration, and a letter will go out to them to say, we've caught you speeding, and if it's, if it happens again, your details will be sent over to the police, and then that's how we take it further forward.
Just come back, Chairman. That sounds like a cunning plan. Also, you were talking, I don't know if it's TrueCam, but that the partnership thing where you get the police, what's the word? Basically, you've got the police there, but you've also got the public who have been trained to use it. They used to do that along, they used to do that along, what's the name? No, not Goldhanger, Colchester Road, but that seems to have died a death.
So the community speed watch people, unfortunately, when COVID hit and lockdown happened, it was withdrawn, and it was suggested that because a lot of the trained members of public for community speed watch were of an elderly nature, that they were sitting in the high risk category. So therefore it was withdrawn, and nobody was asked to go out and do any community speed watch because of COVID and because of regulations and because of safety. So it's been reintroduced, but it's about training up more people and getting people out and wanting to do it. And they can either go out as a group of people themselves, or they can go out with an officer.
Thanks for that. So, Spencer, can we actually sort of highlight that aspect on next week when you're down at the plantation hall? See if we can get some volunteers to take that up.
Yeah, most certainly, Councillor. I mean, I've got the email address for the person at the fire service who operates the community speed watch scheme, and Acting Inspector, Chief Inspector Thurston pointed out, I think it's the volunteer base coming back from the pandemic in almost every area. Whilst it has been brilliant throughout the pandemic, we're finding even things like street pastors, because a lot of the street pastors we have in their older years, they're high risk groups and they don't want to do it anymore. So I think it's going to take a while to build again, but most certainly next week it's something we can look at by all means. And it's also, I don't think I really finished off when we spoke about the access to the building, the police station here. We're more than happy to have that conversation with the police, and any way we can improve that, we will. Good to reiterate that at this stage, I think. So with the new team coming in, that might be a good opportunity to change it.
Yeah, because about the access to the police station, I've tried a couple of times to ring the bell and whatever, and I think I grew another year older. But also, that's the only lift facility which is now within the police area. So if ever anyone wanted to get in with any sort of disability, they couldn't get upstairs. So that was a bit naughty. But I'm thinking ahead now. The CVS, they have people keep volunteering for different stuff. I think that might be an avenue that you could look at.
Right, another question for Councillor Hubner, please.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up on Councillor Beale's point. I mean, the publication or some sort of publicity for this, getting these teams back on. I mean, because I wasn't aware of that, so I'm sure a lot of other people aren't. So can I urge whoever is responsible for that to get out and spread the word?
Okay. Thank you very much again, Spencer. I can finally say thank you. We now move on to...
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I have an answer to my question, which feels so long ago?
Oh.
I'll take that.
Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bell. In regards to hate crime is specifically defined, and it's a very clear definition as to what hate crime is. Also, there's a whole list, as you know, of protected characteristics. In regards to your example about women being accused of saying something about a paedophile.
Perhaps if I can just clarify, there is a fear, and certainly some police forces, not all, but some police forces appear to have been captured by gender ideology, and they have received training from organisations such as Stonewall and the LGBT Foundation that misrepresents the protected characteristics and includes gender identity in that list, whereas the actual protected characteristic is gender reassignment, as you know.
Yeah.
This has resulted in police going knocking on people's doors and in some cases arresting them for hate crimes such as misgendering someone on social media. And this is a great concern to a lot of people. It's disproportionately women that are finding they're getting these visits. And I just want some reassurance that Essex Police are going to apply the law, not what is colloquially referred to as Stonewall law, when you're dealing with hate crime. Please, I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. I can reassure you, having worked on Chelmsford and Maldon CPT as a sergeant for the last 3 years, where we deal with hate crime, it's one of the types of crime that we specifically deal with. I can reassure you that that's not happening. We specifically apply the definition, and we specifically deal with those matters concerning the protected characteristics, as you mentioned.
That is very reassuring, Sergeant Darby. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
You happy with that? Right, okay.
I'm happy with that, Mr. Chair.
Right, we move on now to the police performance update presented by Sergeant Matt Dolby and Chief Inspector Kelly Thurston acting as a commando, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, Steve Scott Haynes.
Now, you mustn't misrepresent yourself. Carry on, you two.
I'm actually not going to do the presentation. I'm going to let Sergeant Matt Dolby do it because he's put the presentation together and he's going to be he's the new sergeant for the new town centre team. So it's a good way for him to introduce himself and get affiliated with yourselves. So I'm just here to
answer the awkward questions.
Yeah.
There's not delegation then.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Sergeant Matt Dolby. I'm the new Maldon Town Team Sergeant, and that team has been operational for the past couple of weeks. Just by way of an introduction, prior to that, I was a sergeant over at Chelmsford and Maldon CPT and held that position for 3 years. And I've got 19 years police experience working in a variety of roles. So I'll go on to the police report for the Maldon district. If I can go to the next slide, please. So this is just a false plan, just to give you a little bit on that. Our main effort is around victims' violence and vulnerability and visibility, and that sets out our priorities within the plan. Rape and serious sexual abuse is one of them, domestic abuse, drug and alcohol related violence, child abuse and exploitation, violence against women and girls, hate crime, burglary and robbery, serious and organised crime, death and serious injury, stalking and harassment, and business fraud and cybercrime. So that's our main focus for the upcoming year. If I could have the next slide, please. Unfortunately, there has been an increase in crime, as we all know. Overall, across Essex, there's been an increase of 8.3% over the last 12 months. And the Maldon district has seen an increase in crime of 5.2% overall, with an increase of 7.7% in relation to victim crime and a reduction in state crime of 6.2%. Next slide, please. Violent crime, which includes violence with injury, homicide, stalking and harassment. It also includes violence without injury, death or serious injury caused by unlawful driving, is up by 9.4% in Maldon. And the main areas that we've seen around those increases are in relation to violence with and without injury. Next slide, please. Just in comparison with the rest of Essex, you can see Maldon sitting there at 5.2%. So we're in 10th spot there. And as you can see, there's an increase across the force. Next slide, please. We've had a reduction in crime, however. Personal robbery is down by 8.3%. Theft by shoplifting is down by 29.4%. Theft from vehicles are down by 14.5%. Theft of pedal cycle is down by 18.2%. And death and serious injury on our roads, there's been no change in that. There's been 2 for this period, so that remains level. ASB is down 61.8% of the figures that I was provided with. Moving on to solved crime. Solved rates on sexual offences are up 11.1% overall. Solved rates in relation to theft offences are up by 57.1%. Vehicle offences including interference are up by 133.3%. And solved rates for theft are up by 41.7%. Possession of weapons are up by 112.5%, but that's mainly due to proactive policing and stop searching and using those powers. Obviously, if we're searching somebody and we find the weapon, the crime's generated, it gets detected, etc. Why has crime increased in Maldon? There's a lot of theories as to why crime does increase. They're obviously complex. Population increase, peer pressure, drug and alcohol abuse, poverty, unemployment. There's lots of dynamics which play the part in that. And whilst crime has increased, it has decreased in certain areas. Maldon is below the overall Essex increase by 2.9%. I think I might have gone ahead of myself a little bit, so I do apologise, Tara. What does Maldon look like in terms of policing? So Maldon enjoys 24-hour, 7-day-a-week local policing team coverage. So they're your emergency response officers. 5 shifts of them working across the year. In addition, Maldon's supported by the Criminal Investigation Department, the domestic abuse teams, and the community policing teams. There's also, we've got a lot of volunteer officers that provide coverage to Maldon as well. And within the Maldon district, we know it's a large rural area. We've got the rural engagement team, which Spencer's already spoken about previously. They've grown in numbers and we've seen some excellent work that they've been performing recently. We've got the Marine unit as well. I'm also pleased to say that the Maldon Town team, which I'm the new sergeant of, is now operational. We've been working out of Maldon Police Station. At the minute, we've got myself and 3 constables. The team's growing and we should be at full capacity by December of this year. Spencer's already touched on it, but we've got the community engagement and safety officer dedicated to the Maldon area, and we've got the tri-service officer who was already spoken about. We've also got those support units as well that provide a service to Maldon. As I said, we've got the Marine unit, we've got our disruptor units, which they go out disrupting criminality. We've got our operational support group based at Boreham, and we can obviously call those specialist assets in when needed. Spencer's already explained what the community engagement and safety officer does, so I won't go on too much about that, but Rosie does fantastic work working collaboratively with the Community Safety Partnership and other partners. Again, the tri-service officer, Leslie, does great work. Offers advice on crime protection, fire prevention tactics and techniques, and he's also a trained first responder. And he's actually acquired some really good intelligence recently, which has led to the acquisition of warrants, which we've executed in the district. We've got a dedicated schools operation, and the Chelmsford and Maldon CPT and our town centre teams, we deploy daily to the secondary and primary schools within the Maldon district where the operational demand allows. So that's been running for about 2 years now. We've got a database of all the schools within the district, and we go down that database, visiting all of the schools. The other day we was at All Saints School in Maldon. We visited the Plume School the other day. So as a new team, I'm looking to build those relationships within the schools. And we've already had some fantastic feedback in regards to that. There are quite often a lot of complaints in relation to the schools around driving and parking at school drop-off and pick-up times. I've already taken that on board as an issue, and I'm speaking with the enforcement manager and the parking attendants within the council, and we're going to do some joint work visiting those schools and taking some enforcement action. So yeah, the Maldon Town team, as I say, we are operational. And I'll just come back to a point I think somebody mentioned in regards to visible policing. It's a real passion of mine to get out there on the beat. We've been out across the district. We was out in Maldon High Street regularly over the past 2 weeks, and the local residents and the businesses, the feedback has been brilliant. They're really happy to see us out there. The team they've been really visible for the last 2 weeks since the inception of the town team, and as I say, the comments that we've seen on Facebook has been really positive. Next slide, please. Where are we? Okay, also we've got a dedicated Maldon neighbourhood watch phone. What that is, it was identified quite some time ago that our neighbourhood watch coordinators were, they had some really good intelligence to give us, but they were ringing 101 on the non-emergency line, and by the time they'd got through to somebody, whatever they was witnessing had passed. So we've devised a dedicated hotline, for want of a better phrase. All of the neighbourhood watch coordinators for the Maldon district are on it. And if they've got issues or any concerns, they ping a message through to the phone, and then whoever's holding that phone, it's normally the community safety and engagement officer or the sergeant. They will review the information and they will deploy officers to it if need be. So what work has been done recently? This is just within the past couple of weeks. We regularly get incoming emails from members of the public within the district. This particular one was concerning antisocial behaviour at a location called the Firs in Maldon. Officers deployed straight away to deal with those issues. Next slide, please. The Marine Unit have been in the River Blackwater. They've been conducting patrols and offering safety advice. Rural Engagement Team, they've been out in Ashildon. There was a 999 event there recently. Really good community engagement. So that was really good to see. We've got officers there patrolling Burnham on Crouch and North Fanbridge. Another 999 event that you can see there that was put on for community engagement. We've also had some weeks of intensification recently, one being the ASB Awareness Week and a Street Week, as Spencer mentioned. It was really good. Our Chief Superintendent was out. We spoke with lots of people about ASB, making them aware how to report it. And the Street Week was an intensification period around all local issues that we could try to deal with within that week. So we saw a range of tactics implemented to deal with that. Next slide there. That's one of the new officers of the Maldon Town team, PC Bogle. She's there at Morrison's in regards to Hate Crime Awareness Week. And we were there educating residents and businesses around what hate crime is, how to report it, and what impact such crime can have. We've also been presenting at the secondary schools around hate crime as well. Moving on, it's been National Speed Campaign Awareness Week recently, so you can see officers there conducting speed checks within Maldon, that one was. 4 drivers were reported for excess speed. High speed recorded was 48 miles an hour and a 30 limit. Just touching on Les Dennis, the Tri-Service Officer, he as well as our Community Safety and Engagement Officer, they come up with some fantastic intelligence around drug dealing in the Tollsbury area. As a result of that, the Maldon Town team, in conjunction with some other teams within Essex Police, executed a warrant at an address in Tollsbury. It was a positive warrant, so that was great work. We've had issues in Burnham. People have been concerned at the train station, so we've deployed there, conducting foot patrols in the Burnham on Crouch area. And this is one of our school visits, which we did recently at All Saints Primary School. The next door nursery asked us to come in and talk to the children, which we did. And it was really good. It's fantastic to engage with the children and the staff there. Touching on, I know speeding has been raised. With the new Maldon Town team, when we're fully operational, I've already got a training request in for all of those officers to be trained in speed gun usage, so they'll be deployed to various areas within the district. And and we will be out there conducting speed checks. I think it was yourself, Councillor Hurd, you asked about the High Street and we said we didn't have the figures. Just to touch on that, the other evening last week, we was on foot patrol again in the Maldon High Street, and a vehicle literally sped past us. I would estimate the speed to be about 50 miles an hour. We couldn't enforce the speed because we had no device at the time. We wasn't checking for the actual speed, but that vehicle was stopped and the vehicle got seized for no insurance. So there has been an enforcement action taken around the manner of the driving, but not necessarily the speed. But he received 6 points and £200 fine on his licence. And we've got plans in place to do further operations in the High Street with our special constabulary. So that's my presentation. Thank you everybody for listening.
Have you got any questions, please? Councillor Hurd.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate the information about the vehicle that was stopped. You know, that is good news. Now, you've spoken a lot about the various different things that are happening, the Marine unit and the tri-service officer, etc. But the proof of the pudding is in the figures, and those are the figures that I want to speak about, because just for your information, I sit on the Police and Crime panel, and I regularly challenge the Police and Crime Commissioner on the figures for Essex, and all crime in Essex is up by 10%. But tonight I'm specifically concerned about the Maldon district. So all crime in Maldon has gone up by 8.5%. You've spoken about that. There are no increase in solved rates. Victim-based crime is up 11%. Violence against the person is up 12.6%. Sexual offences are up 27.4%. Robberies are up by 7%. Theft is up by 18%. Burglary up by 17%. Vehicle theft is up by 24.6%. And hate crime, as we know, has increased. My concern is that with all the things that are going on, crime isn't being solved. We are recording more crimes, but we're not solving any. Well, we're not solving enough. I understand the issues and the problems because I've spent 30 years in the police myself, so I understand the problems that there are. But I think that these figures are showing that whatever's going on isn't working, because crime is rising, solved rates are going down, and I'm wondering if you could help me why that is.
In terms of the solved rates, there's 22 different outcomes that we can apply to an investigation. We obviously charge people, we postal requisition people in the post, we give out court disposal options. So there's so many different ways that we can dispose of a crime, and it's my understanding, and I'm sure the Chief Inspector will correct me, but some of those historic outcomes that would normally be used to be included in the solved figures have since been removed. We don't use them anymore. That could be one of the reasons. But we can only, crime can only be solved if the evidence is there to support the full code test. And if that evidence isn't there to solve it, then we just unfortunately cannot solve that crime. We do experience as well, there's people often report crime, but then they don't engage in the process of cooperating with the police in terms of evidence. So that will be outcomed as a particular outcome, and it won't be a solved, obviously it won't be a solved mark. So that's the difficulty there. You got anything else on it?
So there are lots of ways. So as Sergeant Dalby has said, there's lots of different ways that we can outcome offences, and some of our outcomes we class as a positive outcome but don't necessarily sit under a solved rate. So we can positively outcome a crime. So say, for instance, a crime gets reported in a school, we're not in the business of criminalising children unless they need to be criminalised. We are not in the business of criminalising them, because what we don't want is in 10 years' time to have a society of adults, young adults, mid-20s, who have all been criminalised when they were younger for potentially mistakes that they've made as a child. So we don't want to criminalise them, which has been done in the past. So we're not in the business of doing that. So we will look to positively outcome the offence, but it won't be by charge or postal requisition or anything like that. It may well be that we've directed them to a different service, to a charity, to the youth offending team, and sometimes by diverting them to another team or another area or another partner for them to take control and deal with it, that's a positive outcome, but it's not a solved rate. So we would dispose of that crime effectively on our system, file it as a positive outcome, because we have done something about it. We haven't just gone, oh, we're not interested in that, we're going to let it go. But it's not been solved, as in we haven't sent them to court, or we haven't charged them or cautioned them or something like that. And also within our figures, what it doesn't show is it shows the figures of Mrs. Miggins is a victim, and there might be 10 records related to Mrs. Miggins with all from the same offence but different suspects, and that will all count towards a rise in the figures. So they'll all show as a rise in crime. And unfortunately, we are going to see a rise in crime because of the cost of living crisis. That is naturally, and I know everyone comments and says about the cost of living crisis is coming. I think the cost of living crisis is here and has been here for quite a few months, and that has definitely had an impact on the rise of crime.
I'll come back on that. Thank you. Yes, I know Mrs. Miggins, and I know that she has been constantly assaulted and stolen from, etc. So, can you just confirm, Inspector, that all burglaries are attended by officers?
So Essex Police has as a strict policy that all burglaries will be attended by police officers. Now, I can't comment whether that is strictly adhered to. What I can say is that our policy is that all burglaries will be attended by an officer. Now, it may well be that that's lapsed over the last few months. I don't know, and I can't comment on that. But as of now, there is a firm footing in place to say that all officers or all burglaries will be attended by a police officer, and that is Essex Police's pledge.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have some more questions, Chairman, if I may. Right. The other thing that you spoke about, you've got many volunteer officers in Maldon Town. I know that Maldon Town Council has 3 vacancies for paid specials, which haven't been filled for some time. So if you do know of anybody, they can be financed. The money is already there for them. I'm just a little bit concerned that you're telling me about these solved outcomes. Are you saying that we can't rely on these figures? Because it's telling me that that the most solved rates are reduced or very low. Are you saying that these figures are not correct?
No, the figures are correct for solved rates, but what you have to understand is a solved rate is something where we've sent somebody to court, or we've charged somebody, postal requisitioned them, given them a caution, a conditional caution or something like that. That's a solved rate. So the figures are correct on the solved rates. What the solved rate won't tell you is what a positive outcome has been, where we've diverted somebody to another partner or an outside agency or something like that. That doesn't sit under a solved rate because that is not a solved crime.
Right, thank you. That through you, Chairman. Then I don't really think that this committee can have that confidence in those figures if they're not reflecting the true picture. This committee is here to scrutinise what is happening in the area. And I don't feel that I'm getting the correct picture, because what it's saying to me is that of all of the crime in Maldon, only 8.5% of it is actually solved. Now that can't be right. 3,864 offences and 371 solved. 8.2%. Same with violence against the person. 1,941 offences, 158 solved.
So yes, the solved rate is correct. So what they're saying is the solved rate is correct. We've solved those crimes. We've got a suspect on the end of it. We've charged them, or we've cautioned them, or we've given them a conditional caution. So we've solved that crime. If we have a crime that comes in that we say we're going to, it's for instance, going back to a child that's committed a crime, and we send them over to a partner and they get dealt with by a partner, that is an unsolved crime. It's a positive outcome because we've done something, but we have not solved the crime. There's a difference between a positive outcome and a solved crime.
Okay, I've almost finished, Chair. I think somebody's got the... Right. What I see on the figures in front of me is, as usual, a sea of red. I see it not only on force level, but I see it in Maldon as well. And really, to be properly measured, then we need to see more green on there. Now, I'm not quite sure how you're going to do it, but I don't think that these figures are truly reflecting what is happening. An example is, if you have a 50% cut in robberies, that means that we've had 2 or 1 instead of 2. And I know that I've spoken with Spencer before about how these figures don't truly reflect the actual case. What I will say is that well, I can't say that because that was to do with the Crime Commissioner, but they're talking about a very, very high feedback of 89% satisfaction with the police. But I'm sorry, but that's not what I'm hearing. You know, I support the police as much as anybody else, but we need to see more people out on the beat, and we need to see some of these crime figures down, because that's what people are being measured on. And just finally, have you finally got your interview room here? A dedicated interview room, which has been promised for at least 3 years that I've been asking for it.
There is an interview room here where suspects get interviewed, if that's what you're referring to. Yeah.
Is it a dedicated police room for you? It's not an office that you borrow.
No, it's a dedicated room. I've actually been sitting in it today. They've got mobile interview equipment, and suspects come into the police station, they're interviewed in accordance with PACE.
I'm very pleased that that's actually happened, so well done for that, and I hope that all the new lockers that arrived recently will indicate a lot more police officers here, and therefore increase the visibility. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bell, finally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't want to forget you.
I know you wouldn't, Mr. Chairman. I work with looked after children, so I'm not a fan of criminalising children, as you might imagine, and this is actually what I want to hear. I don't want to hear about people being locked up. I want to hear about people addressing the issues behind their crimes. I want to hear about people with substance misuse issues getting help so they don't reoffend, and children getting. But please, is there, and I appreciate it's difficult because of all the partner agencies involved, but as Councillor Hurd has said, you guys are doing yourself a disservice here. Is there any way we can capture all this good work that's going on? Because, I'd much rather someone who's had a 10-year heroin habit and's got 56 offences, goes into rehab, gets support, doesn't offend again, then they get banged up again, because it's a better long-term solution. But we must be able to capture that in order to reassure ourselves and our residents. Big ask, but is it possible? Thank you.
I don't know how, so obviously we don't run the data ourselves, it goes through our analysts. It's something that we can ask. I don't know how possible it is. I don't know how frequently it can be run. I don't know is the honest answer, but it's certainly something I can ask for.
That would be lovely. Sorry, just briefly to come back, because it looks bad and it's not. And you know, we want to restore faith. We know faith in you guys has taken a bit of battering. We want to restore that. So any way that we can do that would be absolutely
Yep,
brilliant.
I can certainly ask the question and see if we can have a look at what we call a positive outcome. So it might not be a solved outcome, but it would be a positive way of dealing with something. I'll have a look into it for you.
Councillor Mays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've got just a couple of areas. I'm quite interested in knife crime. Concerns me greatly. Yeah, stabbings are not good. I can't find in any of the data that we've been provided any information on stop search and the link between stop search and then recovery of knives. So that would be interesting to know where we're at with that. I attended Crucial Crew this year for the first time. Wow, blown away. Absolutely fantastic. And I would urge every single member here today, next year, to try and shadow a session, because knife crime was one of the things that we did cover, or that they covered. I'm also interested, you talked about, Sergeant Dolby, about engaging with schools. I'd be interested in how you're actually doing that. You know, is it just going into the reception, or is it actually going into the playgrounds and sports fields, etc.? You also talked about a dedicated watch line with Neighbourhood Watch. I'd like just a little bit more information. Maybe you could send that to me. I don't need necessarily an answer here and now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
Yes, so really, listening to what other members are saying as well, and I know it's not something that you're perhaps directly responsible for, but I think one of the problems, and I'm a new member, so I was elected only in April of this year, and looking at this for the first time, it just looks like a data run. There's very little analysis or explanation. And somebody did send me a really useful link, which I know was passed on to you, Matt, from the LGA research. So for example, and you're probably not going to be able to see it in here, but you get maps comparing figures nationally for rural crime, and it gives you a bit of a better perspective. And also, you know, you're able to look at it did show, for example, that from 2018 to now, it's RAG rated in 4 different categories. And we've moved from green right up to, but it's like a second amber, so just under red now. So in terms of crime numbers for victim-based crime. And so that sort of, that gives you an overall perspective. And when you've just got pages of data just based on Essex, and you've got cities in there as well as rural areas, it didn't feel, because we are a scrutiny committee, it did seem a little bit difficult to process. So I don't know if it's just feedback for Essex Police generally, that and I think taking on board everything that Councillor Bell said and that Councillor Mays has said, it would be lovely to hear a bit more, because those presentations we get are great, but a bit more about what the figures are relating to. Because actually, as a reporter many years ago, I actually went to see and reported on one of the very first Crucial Crews many decades ago in Brentwood, and it was fantastic, and it'd be so good to have a little bit more, you know, around data. Well, I don't know how you provide data on that, but certainly data with regard to how you're dealing with children in the schools. And some feedback even from schools and that kind of thing. And I realise, you know, it's asking a lot of you, because you've got to dedicate yourselves to fighting crime. But I don't know if there's a way that Essex could make reports generally that were a bit better than a standard data run that I think doesn't tell us a huge amount. And that's just feedback, because what I've heard here tonight has actually been really encouraging. But having looked just at this, I was actually quite concerned. So that's just what I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Haybridge Garden suburb is about to sort of start being constructed, so the population of Maldon is going to be increasing. I was just wondering whether the manning levels that you've sort of stated have been put together with that in mind.
I don't know is the answer to that. What the staffing levels that we've got for the response teams are staying the same, and the uplift is for the town centre team. But you've still got the CPT team that cover Chelmsford and Maldon as well. So although we've got the town centre team who run out of Maldon, the CPT team run out of Chelmsford, but they cover Chelmsford and Maldon.
Right, so the future sort of population levels doesn't come into the manning planning then?
I don't know if there's anything on the horizon to put more officers in Maldon. I don't know is the answer to that. That's not something that I get involved in.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chairman. It does strike me that as society changes, the figures fluctuate and people's with the cost of living crisis, but I think we've somehow got to try and stop it at some kind of source. And like there was my fellow councillors were saying with schools, is there in future going to be a programme where perhaps you spend someone once a month or whatever in a school trying to, I don't know how you're going to do it, but what sort of plans do you have, or are there any really for that? For stopping it at source, really, I think. I know it's the parents, but...
So I can answer some of the stuff around the schools. Schools are quite tricky because some schools will interact with us and are very supportive of us going in and speaking to the children and getting involved in things, and some schools, believe it or not, are not so supportive. And we have within the LPA, not Maldon, within Chelmsford and Maldon, we have a lot of schools. We have over 90 primary schools altogether, and then we've got, I think, just under 30, I think, secondary schools around that. And we try and cover all of the schools. But we go from a school that will give us full access and give us lanyards and access into the school. We don't have to make an appointment. We can go into the school, we can walk around the school, and we can sit and have lunch with the children if we want to. And we go from a school that's that supportive to, we have a school on the other end of the scale who, if we attend without having made an appointment, the head teacher will make a complaint about it. So we have two opposite ends of the scale that is very difficult to kind of deal with all of the schools in the same way. So one of the things that I've tried to do, and one of the things that we're hoping to do amongst the CPT and the Maldon Town Centre team, is sit in on what is called the MESH, which is the meeting that is attended by all of the head teachers of the secondary schools. And by sitting in on that, that means that I can speak to the head teachers directly and explain that instead of seeing it as the police that come into the school and it's all negative because we're setting those up as being an outlier for the problems that are being caused. We want all of them to sign up and say, yes, come and visit our school, come whenever you would like, come and talk to the students. And I think because society has changed, and because children seem to be a little bit less reactive to their elders than they perhaps were when I was younger. They're very much more. They're not afraid to speak their mind. They're not afraid to question authority. They're not afraid to sort of disobey what their teachers are saying. I've come from a school this afternoon where I was speaking to the deputy head teacher, who was saying that he literally had a child standing there being verbally abusive and circling around the teachers, like going, "What are you going to do about it then?" And when contacting the parents were, "Well, he hasn't done anything wrong." So when you're faced with things like that, it becomes very difficult to try and support and get into these children and get them to listen to us, because they don't see authority as something to be concerned about. So there's a couple of things that I've suggested. There's a couple of things that I've put out there to the schools that I would like to do. One of those being take knife archers into the schools. I'd like to take knife archers into all of the schools. I would like all of them to sign up for it. And the reason that I want all of them to sign up for it is because then they can't sit there and say, "Oh, we're being picked on and we look like we're a bad school," when we're not. One of the other things I would like for the schools to give us an open door policy, so that my officers can go in at any time of the day and just go and walk around the school, talk to children. I've got a school where I've got an open invite. My officers can go in at any time. They're allowed to go into lessons and interrupt the lessons for 5 minutes and say hello, speak to the children, speak to the teachers. Due to some other problems with another school, they've also kind of said, "Yeah, please come in." And I spent 2 hours walking around the school, going into lessons and actually speaking to the students in the lessons and supporting the teachers when the kids were walking past, going from one lesson to another, and they're being told to pull their trousers up, tuck their shirts in, and they're just walking off and ignoring the teachers. Myself and some of the officers that I was with were assisting the teachers and pulling the kids to one side and making them do what they'd been told to do, pretty much. If we can get the schools signed up to that, brilliant, because then my officers can go in and they can speak to the teachers, they can support the teachers, they can show that the teachers aren't on their own, that they're not trying to stand up to these kids and with no support from outside. We've got currently in Chelmsford at the moment at one of the schools a project that's been ongoing for the last few months, called Players One, which is basically a 10-week course where an officer is assigned to the school. They'll go in and the school will identify some children within a certain year group that are vulnerable for various different reasons. They're disruptive in lessons, they're, missing school, they're not attending classes, they're on the verge of being expelled, whatever the case may be. And we're trying to work with those children and pull them back from going down the wrong path and bring them back into sort of engaging with us and engaging with the teachers. And this is something that has been trialled. It's been trialled that we've had 3, we're on the 3rd session and we're trialling it. There's outside speakers, agencies coming in and explaining to the children about drugs, alcohol, CSE risk. We have perception, which is a very big thing. So we'll show them some CCTV footage of a big group of youths with the hoods up, standing outside McDonald's or standing in the high street, and what does that perception look like? Because they might not be up to any good. They might be absolutely fine and doing nothing, but the perception is that they are naughty, horrible, people to be afraid of. And that's something that we want to teach them to be aware of. I think it's really important that we get into the schools and we try and teach this to the children that we've identified are vulnerable as being pulled into this type of way of life. We need the schools to sign up to this. We need the schools to agree to doing it. And once they're on board, obviously we can't run a session across all the schools at the same time, but we can certainly look at the schools that are asking. If we've got children within that school that are sitting with our child and young person officer, or they've come to light with us many a time, or we've got reports from the school that they're struggling and they need assistance, then we can almost matrix score them and we can identify which schools we need to go into first and which schools we need to go and help you know, it's been a success. Our first 10 weeks was a success. We had one child from the group of 14 children step forward and saying that after the 10 weeks he stepped forward and said that he was being used as a runner to run drugs, and he hadn't had the ability to be able to stand up and talk about it beforehand. So it was successful. And those children that have just done the last two groups, speaking to the head teacher or the deputy head today, he said that they've got all of those children, all 14 of those are now off of report. They're all engaging, they're all talking to the teachers, and you know, so it's been really positive. So when we get into the first mesh meeting, I'm not sure when it's going to be, that will be put out to the schools. So that will be put out to all of the schools. So it will be put out to the schools in the Maldon district. Sergeant Dorby's team will pick that up, and his team will go into those schools, and we will offer that Players 1 to the schools. The idea being, after the half an hour or so, 45 minutes of the input from the external agency, they then get to go and play football, either with a Chelmsford City football player. We're looking at trying to get Billericay Football Academy college students on board to try and see if we can get them to come in and engage with the children as well. And also Active Essex are on board and they want to be part of it as well. So there's a few details that we need to iron out, and it is something that is still very much in its infancy, but as of next year we're hoping to get that rolled out across the board, because I do strongly believe that we need to get into them as young as we can to try and change that cycle of events, so that when they get older, you know, sometimes it's a little bit late to try and turn somebody around when they've already gone down the wrong path. It's a lot more difficult to get them to come back onto the right way of behaving. So there is a lot of work ongoing with the schools, but it's very, very slow. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it is there. The groundwork is there.
Anybody else before I go?
If I can remember some of the things I'm trying to talk about,
Sorry.
I'm going to have to get myself a notepad. I honestly think you're on a hide into nothing with the schools. And the reason I say that is probably because a lot of the problems stem from the lack of parental control. I mean, don't get me on the high horse, because basically there's no discipline in the house. And it's probably because the parents are on drink or they're on drugs, which is happening a lot now. And they're basically getting out and they think that's the norm, which is why they end up doing whatever. But I mean, you're interacting with these children, but if you've got a child that's basically disrupting the whole class, they're not allowed to touch them anymore. You know, and they went, I can do whatever I want. What can you do about it? Well, I know in our day it was the strap or whatever, like, you know, and have some of that. But you can't do it. It's a namby-pamby state now. And because there's no discipline, it's why they think they can get away with it. I'm not, on a positive note, I'm not sure if it's the Police and Crime Commissioner puts out a circular or something. I tend to get that at least once a week. But I think, is it a local one where you guys, the rural team or something, like you said about the woods? Is that the rural team putting that out? Because that's really informative, and it lets people know where they've been and what they've done.
That's the dispatch.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's produced by our department, and that gets sent out.
Have you thought about getting some psychics? That might sort these figures out. That'd help out, Councillor.
Anybody else want to ask a question before I go to Councillor Hurd? Councillor Hurd.
Thank you very much. Really, just to say that, as always, it's always nice to see the Police and Crime Commissioner come to these meetings. I have the opportunity to speak to him, but I know that other committee members do not. I think that the point raised by Councillor Morgan about the new housing is quite right. You know, let's have him here and let's see if he can justify the amount of police per head of population. I would like to have this committee talk to him about the crime figures. The second, so that is my request, that this committee asks the Police and Crime Commissioner to come here at the March meeting To my knowledge, I think he's been here twice in my 10 years. So I think I would like to see him here. The second
Can I answer that? The last time I asked him to come, he would come to speak to us but not be interrogated by the committee because he already has his own interrogation by you and everybody else. So he'll come and do a presentation to council, but he might not do a presentation to open your scrutiny.
With respect, Chairman, this is a scrutiny committee.
Yeah,
it's not a nice little comfortable
No, I know that.
chat. And I think that we should make the invitation if other members agree with that. The other thing that I would like to know is, and I have spoken about this before, is the knife bin that's outside these council offices. It's been there for about 4 years. As far as I know, there's no planning permission for it, but it does seem to be part of the furniture. Now, I've asked for it to be moved to the Longfields, and perhaps because I don't think that it should stay in one place all at one time. I know that 16 tonnes of weapons were recovered from all of the bins in Essex, and I did ask if we could have details of what was taken from the Maldon bin, because if it's empty, then we need to move it. If it's full, then perhaps we need to concentrate more on the knife crime. So, is there, Spencer? You might be able to help me, Mr. Clark, with this about the figures for our knife bin. I appreciate that the cause has been lost to move it because there's no funding for it, but I would like to see it moved all the same. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, are you
more-
happy to
Any more
respond on that one?
Pardon?
Are you happy for me to respond on
You
that?
may, by all means.
So, as Councillor Hurd will know, I've been championing his cause for the knife bin. So, when it was last emptied, it was almost full. So, knives were being put in there. I don't know who by, but it was almost full because I took a picture of it with my mobile phone because I was very surprised. With regards to moving the bin, I had an email on Monday in relation to this because I'd asked at the last Responsible Authorities Group meeting, we discussed A, moving the bin, but B, in our opinion, we thought the bin was a little bit too big, i.e. massive. So I contacted the Chief Inspector who's dealing with it, and I've got the image here which I'll show you after the meeting. They've now designed a smaller bin which conveniently fits a wheelie bin inside, which makes it easier for emptying because it can just go into that. As of Monday, I have negotiated a decent price for the new said bin. Presently we're going to go 50-50 with the Balance and Vulnerability Unit for a new smaller bin, and the intention is, if you want to go and see one of these new bins, there's one in Loughton, is that it will be installed in January. So when the next programmed emptying of the bins is, which is January, they'll remove the one from the front of the civic offices, and subject to us getting a concrete hard standing by the Longfield, it will be installed there. So I know it's been a long time, but I'm finally getting there for you, Councillor Hurd.
Thank you very much, and well done. Well done. So my proposal then, Chairman, is that we invite the Police and Crime Commissioner to our March meeting, if the committee agree.
I'll second.
All in favour? Yeah. All in favour, Tara? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Being a fossil, I've just remembered something else. Basically, I'm a little bit worried, as Councillor Spenceley said, that they have decided at Heybridge Parish Council to get rid of the local team. I'm wondering where, or if there is a contact number within MDC. Well, we're not using their service, are we? So I'm wondering who we could report any intel to before it used to be to the community team. now you're supposed to do it online to MDC for someone that might have a look at the information over possibly 2 or 3 days, because that's the only time she's in. And then if there's something needs happening, she'll then detail it. But that's not going to happen now because they're not in that system. So that's going to be a major issue. And just one other thing is I did actually attend the Silver Monday thing. I mean, I could only stay 2.5 hours because I had to go and sort my brother out. But yeah, it was a really good event. I spoke to, I think her name was Rosie. I think it was PC Rosie. I never see Jim there, but there you go. But yeah, I mean, you know, he gave her a lot of intel because, as I said, I'm really against the drugs, and I mean, in my road in particular, there is a major drug issue. And also, I'm glad to hear that there was a drug raid in Tollsbury, because I know where that's being dealt with as well. But what do I know, eh? But thanks for all that you are trying to do.
I've got two questions. With the massive increase in houses in the district and the massive increase in people, does the percentage of crime and all that relate back to the percentage increase in the number of people that have moved into the area? And does it make it look better or worse? Because that might help your figures. You've got an increase, but you've had an increase in population as well.
I don't know.
Okay, right.
Here's the answer,
Next one is going back in history. We had a local Bobby, used to grab you by the lug holes and take you to your parents, tell you off. In the school, we got the cane, and discipline was good in the whole district. Nobody got away with anything. And crime was sorted out because he went round in his little velocette to all the farms and industrial estates. And he knew everybody. No, I'm not watching. No, I'm not watching Heartbeat. But have we gone backwards in time, really, by being so modern? And you sit in the house and you hear these police cars go past every night. And the criminals can hear them coming, so they're gone before they get there. I'll leave it at that, I think.
There are some crimes that are committed that we request the response officers not to have their blues and twos on, and that they do a silent approach.
Good.
So there will be particular crimes such as suspects on premises where we will say, can you please do a silent approach? So there are times where the blues and twos need to be going so that the victims can also hear that the help is on the way.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Because I live in Latchington, just off the high street, and all you hear is every day and night, beep, 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 beep. And of course, when the roads are blocked, how do you get there? Because you've got no police houses in the district at all anymore, have you?
I don't believe so,
No. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
I feel that we shouldn't leave this meeting unless we speak about Crime Stoppers, of course. 0800 555 111. It's a free phone number that anybody can use, anybody can phone, and that will get information back to the police. And I do hope, I know that Spencer promotes it, I do hope that the police promote it as well. We should be having cards, they should be given out, and I think that would be a very good thing if that is happening at the moment. But I think that I just want to bring it to the attention of members and any other members of the public who might be listening to this. 0800 555 111.
Don't need to put it on television anymore, do we? You got it on YouTube. Anyway, thank you three very much for your presentations. It's been very interesting and very informative. And thank you very much.
I'm a crime stopper for Essex. Yeah, so yeah, and he knows that. So yeah.
He doesn't use the siren.
We do use
Right, any other items of business that the chairman decides are urgent? It's just to call the crime commissioners to this meeting, yes? Yes, please. And that's it. No other things you want investigated by the police to come to the next crime?
Well, I'd like to see the figures reduced,
Okay,
Chairman.
right, the figures.
We'll try our best.
Right, I close the meeting at 9:33.